She's an award-winning writer, a hunting guide, archery and rifle instructor, keynote speaker, and all-around outdoors woman who encourages you to get outside, hunt, fish, shoot, and savor all that life has to offer. And now, here's your host, Mia Anstein.
Hey, hi, hello, you all. I'm happy to be visiting with you again. Welcome. Today, I am excited to bring to you a wonderful interview with my friend Nick from the National Deer Association. And I hope that you'll stick around and listen because it's an interview where there's so much information. I was trying to figure out how to break it up into segments and stuff like that. And it's jam-packed with some information, fun facts, and maybe some not so fun facts, but also some great hunting tips and stories and ways you can become involved. So I hope you enjoy the show. Stay tuned.
This winter, stay warm from head to toe with WSI Sports' heater gear layers. Use Leah's affiliate code, LLCO10, at WSISports.com and get 10% off your order. All products are proudly made in the USA. WSI Sports is bringing back pride in American-made clothing. That code once again, LLCO10 for 10% off at WSISports.com.
Well, I'm happy today to bring Nick to visit with you. We'll be sharing some stories and also some outreach and places that you can go to learn more about hunting. Today, I have Nick, who is the CEO of the National Deer Association. And hi, Nick. I hope that you'll say hello to my audience.
I will. I'm anxious to say hello. I've been listening to your show, and so I know a little bit about what's going on, and it'll be interesting to go back and listen and hear my own voice. So thank you very much for the opportunity.
Well, thanks for listening. That's a great thing. I hope that you've enjoyed some of the episodes and learned what I've been doing and where the shows kind of turn and go. And a little bit for you, if you didn't learn from listening to the show, is I do try to share inspiration and encourage people to get outside, but I also, in bumping into a lot of people on the road, I've learned a lot of great things that people are doing in the community. And I've wanted to share that with others to inspire them either to go join something, learn to hunt, learn ways to get outside, or ways to become involved in their communities. And so that's why the National Deer Association, I actually have other friends that are members, and with the Professional Outdoor Media Association, I've visited with Lindsay a little. And so when I bumped into you, I was like, this will be great because there's so many great things that you do. And I think the audience definitely needs to be educated. So I'm excited to have you on the show. Welcome. So just to get going, a broad aspect, if you can just let us know, what exactly is the National Deer Association?
It's a important organization. I always like to start there. So we represent North America's most the most favorite hunted game animal. 8 out of 10 people who purchase a hunting license in the United States is going to pursue deer. And that's far more than any other species. And so we feel a great responsibility to protect not only that animal, but that tradition. And so our mission is to ensure the future of wild deer, wildlife habitat, and hunting. And so it's really all aspects of the animals themselves, their habitat that they're living in, and hunters, and which is a big part of that, because I think it's one thing to be passionate about deer and deer hunting, but even if you're not a deer hunter, you should be passionate about it because, again, if 8 out of 10 people are buying a license to go deer hunting, that's an awful lot of money generated, not just for deer, but for all wildlife conservation. And that's how a lot of our state wildlife agencies are funded. So it's an important organization. It's an honor and a humbling experience to be able to be the lead. And I think our entire staff and team feels the same way about that.
Yeah, it sounds like you guys are doing great things over there. And that's part of, again, why I had you on the show. When you guys are talking about deer, do you focus specifically on whitetail deer, or are you looking at mule deer as well?
Yeah, so we traditionally, I should step back a second. We were originally, our original name of the organization was the Quality Deer Management Association. And so that organization was solely focused on white-tailed deer. So we were sort of born in the South and South Carolina and that whole, east of the Mississippi deal where it's all whitetails, right? But through the merger with the National Deer Alliance to create the National Deer Association, we did this a couple years ago. We are still definitely whitetail heavy, but when it comes to doing the policy work, advocating for wild deer conservation, that would then certainly involve us with mule deer, black-tailed deer, and even elk and moose to an extent. And so we're not spending as much time on those species, but we do when it comes to doing the policy work, which is also a critically important aspect. We have groups like the Mule Deer Foundation, of course, and Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation already. And so it's really in partnership with them and to lend a hand where we can.
Okay, and that's what I was just going to ask you is do you work hand in hand? Do you address legislators together with these other groups, or how does that work?
Yeah, not uncommon at all for all of our organizations to be sitting together, whether it be in the office of a congressperson or signing on letters together. We're part of a group called the American Wildlife Conservation Partnership, AWCP, which we're all part of that, and we will team up on important letters and positions. So yeah, very common for us to work together.
What kind of things do you see coming up in this coming year as far as legislation that you might be? Is there anything that you're in support of? I know there's a lot of things that are against hunting and managing wild animals. So what kind of things do you think you might be supporting this year?
Yeah, one of the things I like to tell people when they bring up legislation, because some people are surprised to know, I use this as an example, there's probably at any one time 100 different bills across the country that impact wildlife conservation or hunting in some way. And people are always surprised to know that. But in terms of very specific things and the fact that you brought up mule deer western species, this is a prime example of one we would partner on. And it's the American Grasslands Act would be one that coming up on this year that we're going to be focused on. And so we're hoping to make that a reality. But even before that, at the end of this last Congress, we got the Chronic Wasting Disease Research and Management Act across the finish line. And that's one that we also worked in partnership with many organizations on. And so we're hopeful that then this next Congress will go ahead and actually authorize the funds to make that happen, because chronic wasting disease is not something that's unique to whitetails. I mean, elk and mule deer also are susceptible to it. So that's another one that we'll continue to be focused on, and even if it means new legislation or whatnot. But I would just describe us as overall a guardian of these species and paying attention to what's happening in the halls of Congress and state legislatures, and even in municipalities. Sometimes it's down to that level. There are issues that we need to be aware of and work on. So we got a pretty keen eye on it.
As we're looking at that and these items, something that I usually, and I try to do on a lot of the episodes, are fun facts for wildlife. And this one's actually a not so fun fact, since you brought up chronic wasting disease, is that chronic wasting disease actually originated in Colorado. And it came out of a wildlife study center where it was in the center and got through the fences there into the actual populations. And I sat on the Sportsman's Roundtable here in Colorado. I've done a few terms on that. And I was really surprised to learn that, because I thought it came from the South, because I had always heard of it with whitetail and stuff like that. And I was shocked that, oh my gosh, this is a Colorado thing. Like, it was terrible in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean,
to learn.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a badge of honor, right? But it's also, and that's the idea, right? It originated there in a research facility in Colorado, and so it's there, right? So the reality is it's not so much about how it started or why. The reality is it's an issue we have to deal with it now, and so it's been. While we've made some strides, there's still so many mysteries around this disease, and it's very frustrating for hunters. And we were just talking about this in a meeting yesterday. We host a national CWD sort of roundtable discussion every other month, where partners from across the country and researchers are on that call. And our communications, you mentioned Lindsay Thomas, our chief communications officer, gives a report. And he mentioned on there that you can visibly see, as we're tracking who's reading our stuff, when you post something about chronic wasting disease, most people don't want to read it because it's not good news. And so it's a frustrating disease for those of us that work on it. and frustrating for those who don't want to hear about it. And so, yeah, there are no winners, but so don't feel too bad. We don't blame Colorado. It is what it is, and we got to deal with it. So,
Yeah, and that's something that hopefully there isn't a lot of blame. But are there other diseases that you guys look at? I mean, being a cattle rancher, I know of some, but is there anything that you guys specifically look at, or is it kind of a CWD highlight? It overtakes everything.
we certainly spend the bulk of our time right now on chronic wasting disease when it comes to our disease work. But also, there's bovine tuberculosis out there to deal with. There's also EHD, which can be confused with CWD. And so, or similarly referred to as blue tongue, that you certainly hear about in the West where you are. And so, that those would be the main ones. But since we brought it up with EHD, for example, one of the big confusing things is that for people that have lived in an area where there have been EHD or blue tongue outbreaks, they often see sometimes dozens or tens of dozens of deer dying in a local area, and that's very scary. And they would say, well, why are we worried about CWD? I can see all these deer dying at one time. And well, there are a lot of reasons for that. I mean, one is EHD is number one, it's not 100% fatal. If a deer gets CWD, it's going to die. EHD is not like that. And the other nice thing is I don't want to say the nice thing, but I guess a positive would be if you do have a localized herd that had an EHD outbreak, the deer can recover from that rather quickly, where CWD is more of this long, drawn out thing that's happening out there. And it's very hard for the average person who doesn't think a lot about this to wrap their heads around that, because they say, well, I'm not seeing a whole bunch of deer laying dead everywhere. Why are we worried about this? Well, because it happens so slowly. You just don't see it. And so seeing is believing, and not seeing is also believing. And so that's one of the challenges we have when we communicate about this.
That's an aspect I really hadn't thought of or considered, but for a non-hunter that doesn't consider it, is there a message that a hunter could share, or how could hunters help with the issue? I mean, I know you guys have an education aspect, in which is part of what you said with articles and people consuming content somehow. But is there anything hunters could do to help you or to help educate the general population?
Yeah, there's a lot that hunters can do. And so that's their interesting aspect to this. Hunters in a lot of ways are on the front lines of this, because one of the ways to manage CWD, or at least slow the spread, is through active harvests of deer and keeping populations in check and not letting them get too large, because this is much like COVID, which we all know way too much about, and have experienced. Deer pass along CWD in very much the same way. And so, when you have big crowds of deer, obviously that's more of an opportunity to spread disease. So hunters, through being willing to harvest, fill their antlered tag and antlerless tags, helping thin the herd is a big part of that. Not moving deer from disease management areas out of those areas, and keeping deer that may be infected, their remains in those areas. And so the easiest thing would be, so that we don't spend your whole show talking about CWD, would be to tell people to go to their state wildlife agency website, and every state wildlife agency is going to have something about chronic wasting disease. Understand what the rules are, understand where the infectious parts are, get your deer tested. All of those things can help help fight this battle that we're in.
Talking about the education programs, is part of the education program encouraging people to hunt? Or I know you do some stuff with new hunters, but does that coincide, or are they two separate programs, or how does that work?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So we do education and outreach is a big part of what we do at the NDA. And so we are working very closely with researchers working on all types of things deer, just about anything you can imagine. Matter of fact, very shortly we'll be heading to the Southeast Deer Study Group, which is really the biggest national meeting just about deer, with deer and deer researchers and all the latest research. And what we do is we help interpret that research and put out information in an easily digestible form for hunters and people who are interested in deer. And so there's that level of outreach, people that are sort of, we call them like the deer nerds, right? So they want to know all the details and the science behind deer, which is cool. But we also are trying to do a lot more with just general education about deer. The average person who may never think about going out and hunting a deer should know about deer. They should know, for example, that 8 out of 10 people that hunt are going to hunt deer. That's an important fact, and why they should support hunting. Because if they're looking out their window watching songbirds in their feeder and they like that, they should thank a deer hunter for part of that, because the management of those species in a lot of ways is funded by people who hunt deer. And so we're trying to broaden our education to the more general, like how many spots do fawns have and why do they have them, right? That type of stuff that's just of general interest, just to sort of spread the word about a great species that we probably take for granted unless we hit it with our vehicle or it's eating our garden. So we do a lot of that. And then you mentioned our hunter recruitment programs. We have a program called Field to Fork, which we're very proud of. And so it's strayed away from sort of the more traditional, let's do a bunch of youth programs and everybody gets a plastic water bottle and becomes a hunter kind of a thing. And so, I don't say that to put those programs down. It's just that what we found is a lot of people that participate in those programs were already coming from families of hunters. And so the likelihood was they were going to become hunters anyway, where our program focuses more on adults who have always wanted to try hunting but have never been invited or never got the opportunity. And so what we do then is we bring those folks in, and we do this all across the country. I think we held somewhere in the neighborhood of 70 events across the country. And we teach them about the species. We teach them how to shoot and gun safety if it's guns we're using, or a lot of times we'll also use crossbows, which are a good tool for these events. And we teach them, we educate them, we show them how to cook venison, we feed them, and then we actually take them out hunting. And we sit with them as a mentor and take them through the process. And I can even just tell you myself, having been in an event that we just did in Missouri at the end of December, I got to sit there and mentor a new hunter, and she shot her first deer. This is a middle-aged woman that always wanted to learn to hunt, and the main reason she wanted to hunt was to provide what she felt was the best possible meals for her family. And I can tell you, as a hunter, there's even nothing more rewarding than being there with somebody that gets their first deer. And so people would be surprised to know what a high percentage of folks out there who have never hunted, and it's only because they were never asked or never given the opportunity. And so our Field to Fork program is really on the front lines of getting those folks the opportunity. And we're finding that a high percentage of those, 80% of those people, when they go through that program, they continue to hunt, which we think is pretty awesome.
That is so awesome. That retention aspect. Are you checking back in with them, or how do you keep the records of how many are coming back to hunting?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because a lot of them, they want to stay in contact with us because now they're bragging, right? They've shot their deer, and now there was one gentleman that we had at an event this year that's now already taken his sons out hunting. And so they're always sending us their stuff, and we're excited. We pass it around, our own email chains in the office, and it's sort of a celebratory time. But we certainly are tracking the people who go on, what happens after the fact. We're about to do some research now that's going to help us understand that a little bit better. And so, yeah, that's a long answer to your question, but yes, we do track that.
Well, no, but it's a wonderful thing, because a lot of what I do is mentor people to hunt, and the ones that I can actually personally help, I can keep records of that. I also work with SCI, with a local chapter, they have a program called the Legacy Hunt, and that's for youngsters that don't come from hunting families. And that we've been keeping track of, and how it spreads. There's something that's so satisfying about being in the outdoors and connected with nature. And we have one young man that he came from a single parent home, and he started hunting, and now his mother is hunting because he is hunting. And her first season, she didn't have anything. This last year, she finally tagged a buck, and it's really cool to see how excited these families are. This year's hunt was just in December, and the young man we've had a few Native Americans, but this young man, he came, and now we try to get the whole family involved. So if the mom wants to go, or a parent wants to go on the hunt, they can. And the little sister, she came when they are processing their animal. She's like, do you think I could hunt in the future? And it's like, absolutely.
Wow, yeah.
So it's neat to see how this spreads, and it brought the family together in many instances. We actually had another, I have been really surprised about the Native Americans, because I think they have all this access and opportunity, but some of them don't. And
Yeah.
so they're excited to get back to their heritage, and organizations can get them there. So that is so exciting. I'm really glad that you're finding a way to keep track of where these are going. And maybe that's something that you can look to also, is where they're sharing it, because what you have just told me is the stages of hunting, which I teach in hunter ed. And you've got those beginners, you've got, the once you've had the success, and then they're probably going to go through their method stages, and you're actually at a sportsman stage. And I actually throw one in, which is a mentor stage, because as a
Mhm.
mentor, what you were just describing is you get to experience those first again and again. And it's so exciting. So I just think that is awesome that you guys have that program.
Well, I love your
Um,
story. I could listen to those stories all day because they're
yeah.
inspiring and they're, but at this point, if you've been a hunter long enough, right, you've heard everybody's, buck story and they're great. But the stories of the people getting their first deer, and there are all kinds of theories out there about why we've lost so many hunters. And one of the obvious reasons is and it's true, a lot of hunters have aged out, right? They're retiring from hunting. But what is also true is we haven't done a great job as a hunting society to pass it on. So why are there so many people out there who have never hunted only because they were never asked? Well, we never thought to ask because it was just part of what we all did, and we never thought about what the future might look like. And so we're playing a little bit of catch up now and doing that with programs like you're involved with in our program. So I'm optimistic that we'll be able to get back on track.
For the love of the outdoors, open spaces, and mountains, shop www.mia.limited/one. The Mac Outdoors Mountains Are Calling series of apparel is perfect for you or your loved ones. Support the channel and shop now. www.mia.limited/one.
Your program, it just to me sounds like such a full, well-rounded system that you have. How many people, you said about 70 events that you've had, how many people are in those events? Is there like an average amount, or is there more in some and less in others?
Yeah, it varies greatly. So some of them can be very small, 3 or 4 people. But the one I was just at in Missouri was 14 people. And so someone may look at that and say, well, really, you're not really impacting, or excuse me, moving the needle with hunting numbers by just those few people. But what I would point back to is something that you said, and that is, well, how does it get passed on beyond that? Because I just gave the example of the father that went home and now his sons are hunting. And this woman that I sat with in Missouri that got her first deer, I can tell you right now, her kids are going to be hunting. And so it is more sort of that pay it forward scenario where people are not, they're participating, but then they're taking it and passing it on. And so, we don't have to rush and save hunting tomorrow and introduce 10 million hunters next year. We need to do this over time and thoughtfully and thoroughly. And the other nice thing about our programs, Mia, is that we don't necessarily have to be the ones doing them. Like you could, for example, hold a field to fork event that we may help support in some way, but we don't have to do it. We would love SCI chapters to do them, or other organizations that are out there, or even a local sportsman's club. We'll help you get there, but we don't have to be the ones to do them. And I think that will be a good way to really spread the opportunity out there.
Right. So for anyone listening, if you want to start something like this, it doesn't even have to be on a large amount. I actually, in a past episode, had the Wyoming Women's Antelope Hunt, which is a huge event. It was
Yep.
amazing when I went to that. But also I feel like a smaller event, if you're hosting 6 people, 5 people, just this legacy hunt is one and their family. A more intimate setting, it can make some people more comfortable, and you can actually have interaction where it seems a little more significant to me. In a smaller situation, that larger one, they have so much help that's also a good way to, if you can get that many volunteers together, then good on
Right.
you.
Right. Exactly.
But when you're having the hunts, something that as a figure in the hunting community, I've been invited to speak at different events and stuff like that. And there is a huge focus on youth and a huge focus on women. And what I have seen is that young men, and I say young, not as in youth, but 20 to 30-year-olds that are wanting to start hunting, a lot of them don't know where to start. And I'm actually reading a book right now that I'll feature later in the book club. But this book, he talks about like getting started and not having anyone to help. And as a hunter, I'm just like, oh my goodness, like not knowing how to field dress and these situations that you can get in. It's wonderful to be able to find a mentor. And basically that's what the NDA is doing, is you're with the Field to Fork program, you're providing a mentorship there, and your education is just awesome. Are there other aspects that you've experienced in these that you feel are important for new hunters to have?
Well, interesting you bring up actually care for the animal once you get one, because getting to that point, I'm not saying getting an animal is always easy. We know better than that, but you go out and you go through the process, and now you've got an animal down. And this is one of the big areas where people need the most help, right? And so I'll just use the most recent experience I had as a mentor. We get to the animal. I put her ahead on the track. It was a short track, but she found the animal quickly. And then it got to the question about field dressing. And I say, okay, this is something that I can either do for you and talk through, or this is something that you can do and I can talk you through, or we can sort of do it together. And so she thought, well, she says, I'm not afraid to do this at all, but I would probably learn better to have you just sort of talk through it. And so that's what we did. And then she was asking me questions about the different organs and so on, and we went through that. So that was an education opportunity. And then they were going to take this deer back with them in some coolers. And so we got it back to the sort of the home station of the event. And I was able to quickly show her how to quarter the deer and get it broken down into the pieces that she could literally throw it in a cooler and go home and do the rest of the processing. And so, I mean, that is one-on-one, hands-on. She got to watch, she got to participate, and she left there with a pretty strong knowledge of what it takes to actually get that animal broken down. But that's just one aspect. I mean, deer, it's not like taking someone fishing for the first time and you got fish to deal with. You're talking about 100-plus-pound animals. It's a big deal to deal with. And, you take any hobby though, like you said, people were confused. Where do I even start? Let's say, like if you've been a hunter your whole life, but all of a sudden tomorrow you say, I want to take up knitting. Okay, well, walk into the store that supplies that stuff and look around and see how overwhelmed you are. Like you won't even know where to start. And that's the one way to put yourself into the shoes of the people that are coming into hunting. We have so much crap out there, necessary, unnecessary, whatever. It's really overwhelming to folks. And I think just being a tour guide to walk them through that is very, very important.
That's super important. Do you guys have gear that you provide with the hunt?
Yeah. And so, again, I'll use the recent example I was just at. We had rifles available, in this case, 243 rifles that we had. And again, we have great sponsors that help us with these things, everything from the rifles to the ammunition. And so that's part of what we do as an organization. We'll probably see you at the SHOT Show coming up. We're there talking with our partners about, hey, can you help support this opportunity? So we often can provide rifles. We often can provide crossbows. And so that certainly is a huge help.
When you are working on the Learn to Hunt programs, do you see a lot of women that are interested, or is there a percentage? Is it kind of a more men, fewer women? How does that look?
Yeah, I can't say that it's quite 50-50. Hank Forster would be the one you'd want to have on the show. He runs the program for us. He could tell you all of these numbers intimately. But I would just say, I think people would be surprised by the number of adult women who want to do this and who just were, and many times, and this is sort of sad, but we hear so many stories about, well, why haven't you ever tried? Because they'll tell the story, well, I grew up in a hunting family, but that was something my dad and my brothers always did. It's like, well, didn't they, were you never asked? And like, well, no.
I tagged along, but it wasn't me.
Yeah. And that's a tragic story. And so, but see, you've overcome that, right? And that makes you a tremendous ambassador and mentor for what we do.
Well, since you brought that up, I grew up in a hunting family, generations of hunters, and I would tag along on hunts, but a lot of times it was like my dad and my brother would go out before school. I would be getting ready, and then he'd bring him back to catch the bus, and they'd be back just in time. whether they got something or not, they would make sure that he got to school. And as my dad got older, he didn't want to hunt anymore, and we were splitting a beef. We would go in halves, and he'd split a half of beef with me that we'd buy. And I was always getting the hamburger, and like he was saving the steaks for him. And I'm not saying that as to knock him for it, but I was just like, it'd be good to have steaks once in a while. And at the time I was a single mom, and I was just like, well, at the time, I think it was like less than $50. It was like $49 or something. I could go get a hunting license. And I've been hunting since I was a child. I just wasn't the one behind the gun. And so I went and got my hunter ed, and my dad was so excited that he bought me a gun for my birthday, a rifle. And, he was just like, yeah, do this. And it was still one of those things. The first time I went out, I went by myself on my first hunt.
Wow.
To go elk hunting. And I was sitting there and I was thinking like, okay, when I shoot this, I'm going to pack this out by myself. Like, I don't have the whole family out here. Like, when I tagged along, that was partly why, so we could all help. So it was like, okay, we need to have more people along on the journey. And I still do solo hunt, and I have packed many animals out by myself. But that's the thing, is women, men, you totally can do it by yourself. You just have to pick and choose where you're going to shoot that animal. If you want to do it 7 miles back, you're going to have a struggle.
Yeah, well, that's a great testament. I mean, and let's be honest, like, you're a small person, right? You're not like you're not a 6 foot tall hulking person, right? And so, yeah, I mean, you're out there, and it's just about want to. And I don't ever, I always am sad when people say, well, I couldn't do that. No, you might say, you can say, I presently struggle, to understand how I could do that, which is far different than I can't do that. And so you went out and you had the spirit to go, and you've done it, and you've learned that it's possible. And yeah, I was talking about deer, but geez, an elk, now we're talking hundreds of pounds of animal. And
Right.
so,
And
yeah, what do I do if I get one of these things on the ground? So yeah, that's an awesome story. Yeah.
so literally, we used a full-time outfit out here, and we would be packing out someone's camp or packing out an animal. We'd be on the trail on our horses, which I do have horses that help me pack out. And that is something. You can hire an outfitter to help you carry your meat if you want. But we would come past these people that had been whitetail hunters their whole lives, and we'd see this guy would like just scratching his head, like, oh my gosh, like, I have this huge animal down. I never realized how big an elk is. And when we hunt whitetail in Oklahoma, we bring the whole body out, that kind of deal. And they're like, what do we do now? And it's like, well, if you want to pay an outfitter, we will help you, field dress this and show you how to do it when it's not hanging in your barn. So, but I was kind of giggling when you were talking about that, because I have run up to people on numerous occasions when it comes to elk, and they hadn't seen that large of an animal. And moose are even bigger. So
Yeah, do your homework, folks. If you're sitting there thinking, I'm going to go on my first elk hunt this year, one of your first considerations need to be, how can I get that thing out of the wilderness? So yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah, there's many aspects to that. So do you personally, like, tell us about some of your hunts? Are you a hunter, or you just like to mentor? What do you have on your bucket list for this year?
Yeah, well, I'm pretty much wrapped up for this year. Yes, I'm a lifelong hunter. I was telling wild hunting stories well before I was even old enough to hunt. And I've always been fascinated by it. And so my big passion has always been archery hunting whitetails. But I certainly love it. I've hunted elk in your state in Colorado. I love that too. I love turkey hunting. People were always like, well, what are your favorite hunts? Because I've had the fortune being in this industry to do a lot of things and go a lot of places. And I say, you know what? I am just as content sitting on a stump in my home state of Pennsylvania looking for a gray squirrel, right? So it doesn't, I love archery hunting deer, but the biggest thing I love is just being out there and the opportunity to pursue game. And so this year I had a pretty decent year. I just finished up right between Christmas and New Year's. I went out and spent a few days in Delaware with a good friend of mine out there, and shot two whitetail does to wrap up my season. I still had a buck tag, and I came close a couple times. But that didn't work out. But I've killed 5 antlerless deer and 1 buck the total this year. I shot a buck here in Pennsylvania. I own some land here and do some deer management to make that property and habitat better. And so that's really my passion at this point. I love teaching new people to go. I love helping provide that opportunity. But I would just say I just love the outdoors. I'm a fly fisherman. Another beautiful thing to do in your state, by the way. There's no state prettier than Colorado, pound for pound, so you're lucky there. But yeah, I guess I would say I love it all with a little bit of, if I had to pick one, it would be archery hunting whitetails. Yep.
That's very cool. Everybody needs to have a favorite. I liked that you're one of your favorites is just to get out there, because that's my favorite, is just being
Yep.
out there. And sometimes it seems like it's a challenge to get out there, but if you put it on your calendar, it just happens. Right now is the time of year to be scheduling that stuff. I mean, we also, with getting started in hunting, since we've traveled down that lane of getting started hunting, what do you think is a good avenue for somebody that maybe doesn't have an association to help them? Where is a good way to go get started hunting if they don't have a mentor group?
Yeah. So I will say one thing that's available now that wasn't back in the day is frankly is social media. There are so many things. Matter of fact, we have resources on our own website and on our YouTube page and whatnot that helps people with this. But there are so many resources now. We have a hunting course, basically a learn to hunt course for very inexpensively. People can go online and they're trained through the whole process. That's a good place to start. That's still never going to um, supplant the in the field experience. And so that would be the other thing I would say is once you have the basics down, okay, how do I get out there, get a license, handle a firearm, all those things, is literally you just need to go. And you need to go and you need to make mistakes and you need to learn things the hard way, which we all did that. There's not one of us, I mean, I've got,
Right.
I don't know, 35 plus years of hunting experience, right? I still make mistakes and I still make the same mistakes I used to make. And so there's never going to be that time where you feel like, you know what, let's put it this way. Anytime I've ever felt like, you know what, I've arrived, I'm never going to make that mistake again. Well, then you make that mistake again. So there's no perfecting this. You don't
Yeah.
have to
Or
be
a
perfect.
bigger one smacks you in the face. You're like, I know everything now. And it's like, no, you don't.
Yes. And that's exactly right. So you can't ever substitute for the experience itself. If at all possible, if you know someone that hunts, ask them to tag along or ask to go along with them. And even contacting through our organization, we can even try to connect people who are interested with mentors. There's nothing
Yeah.
better than a mentor to someone to take you, but I would say use some of the same courage that Mia has used here and just get out there and get after it and learn. You can't make experience happen faster than it does. So go out, be part of the experience. Don't hold yourself to some high standard and just get after it.
Yeah, none of us are perfect. So even I've had people say, "Oh my gosh, you know everything," and it's like in Hunter Ed and in all my stuff. When someone says that, I always say never stop learning, which is part of why I have the podcast. Is I hope people want to learn, and hope that somebody takes something away from every episode. But you brought up social media, which I think is originally how we met, with social media,
Probably.
and
Yep.
then at SHOT Show or something like that. But to me, I like social media, but I think it's a double-edged sword there. And as a hunter, and at me working in I'm a volunteer, but I work in a lot of policy stuff and fight a lot of things. I didn't ask you about bad issues that may be coming up that might negate any conservation programs that we have. But when we're looking at social media, one thing that I see is people who are against hunting or a true model of conservation, they look at a trophy. What do you think a trophy is, and how can people kind of portray a trophy when they're on social media?
Oh, that trophy term.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's been a haunting term, right? Because it means so many different things to so many different people. Um, I have always been of the position that any animal that you take is a trophy in its own way, if you want to use the term trophy. But it's something certainly to be grateful for, and even it's okay to be proud of it. Certainly 100%. And so what that term though has done on the other side is it has given people who oppose hunting, who never will understand the big picture of conservation and why it's important, it's given them a word to use against us. And so, well, these people are trophy hunters. And they don't even have to define the term, right? No, because no one follows up with them and says, "Oh, what do you mean trophy hunter?" They just hear, "Well, these people are trophy hunters." And so, yeah, like my own example, when I'm archery hunting deer, my preference when I'm trying to fill my antlered tag is I like to pursue the mature deer in the herd. The oldest, the wisest, the smartest, and inevitably that typically, not always, but typically means also has the best antlers. Okay. But you also heard me say earlier that I've taken 5 antlerless deer this year. Okay. So it's not, those deer are all trophies to me. And I probably annoy my buddy Ron out in Delaware, but I take a photo with every single animal I take. And I don't care if, well, that was my 3rd doe this year, I don't really need a picture of it. No, that's nonsense to me. Every one of those animals in my mind are my own trophy that I'm proud of, and they all deserve that same level of respect, regardless of what the headgear is and or whatnot. Now, that being said, like any other industry or any other endeavor, there are people that are bad actors. They see it that way. All they care about is what biggest antlered animal they can have, and they don't care how they portray it on social media. And one of the great things about social media is that everybody has a platform to share. But one of the worst things about social media is that everybody has a platform to share. And so we're not all going to share the same. And it's obvious out there. And all we can do is try to, in mass, most of us anyway, be good examples, much like you are, be great ambassadors of our sport, and explain that this is a big picture thing. So they're all trophies to me, and I apologize for the long answer, but that's one I'm pretty passionate about.
No apologies needed. I have my own reasons too. To me, I don't have trophies. They're all memories. I don't put the photos on the wall. I'll put a mount on a wall. And when I look at the mount, every story and memory comes back. Because as you said, you were talking about the hard work and the hunt. That's part of the memory, the 10 days, or I have a bull, the 18 days of hunting in, 11,000, 12,000 feet. It's something that I embrace a challenge. Not that I'm asking for people to throw challenges at me, because I have plenty. But for each hunter, I think it's different, because sometimes I do have friends that they have record-breaking animals that are in books, but they come home many years with nothing, because they want the challenge of getting that old smart one that you talked about. And sometimes they never get it, like someone else did. Or I had one year, one of those guys that he's like, I'm after him. He's not coming in the daylight, and it had gotten hit by a truck or car. I don't know what hit it, but it's not always like, yay, this was there and it's done. So, there's the challenge is part of why we do it. I think at least for me, it is.
Yeah, it's the journey, 100%. I mean, it's if you're focused on the journey, you're going to love it every single time out, regardless of the outcome. There's always a bigger one out there, is what I always tell people. And so you can't get too caught up in that. I mean, I had a deer that I was after and actually missed earlier this year on my place in Pennsylvania, got shot by a neighbor in the firearm season. And so that's just the way it goes. And I was happy for the woman that shot it, and immediately shared the pictures and video. I had all kinds of video of this deer and everything else, and was happy to share that. And that's just the way it goes. It was the journey. I had my opportunity. It didn't work out, and I was able to take a different one later. And so, yeah, if you're just always focused on the destination or the top of the mountain, you're going to forget about each step that's necessary to get there. And so, yeah, for everybody, it's different, but I certainly like the adventure.
Yeah. And I think what you're describing to me is part of the work reward process. And that's something I think hunting is great at giving people, that the endorphins and the satisfaction of a work and reward. And sometimes you have wins and losses. And so my daughter was right on the cusp of that age where everybody got a trophy. And maybe because she came from a family that like that work reward, she's all about like wins and losses, and was on one team of sports where, it was like, oh, well, we're not keeping score. And she was like, then why are we playing? Like I can go exercise anytime, but somebody needs to win or somebody needs to lose. So sometimes those animals win, and sometimes we get to put some good nutritious food on the table. So I love that you kind of brought that aspect out of that work and reward.
Well, I'm glad you brought it. I mean, sports is an example, right? So I coach baseball at the local high school here. And just last night, I had a conversation with them. I said, listen, guys, I said, baseball is a game of failure, and you got to get comfortable with failure right now, because if you're hitting and you fail 70% of the time, you're an all-star. And I brought up hunting. I said, when I go out hunting, if I look at the percentage of time that I put in versus whenever I actually fill a tag, it's horrible. It's like way less than 10% of the time am I actually going to come back with a physical trophy. But man, it's the journey, right? So it's like, it's not always going to turn out how you hope, but you need to walk in and out with a smile on your face every time, because man, what a blessing just to be even able to go out and experience it. And that so many people, still the highest percentage of people, never even go out and experience a sunrise in a cold, crisp morning, when it's cold out. It's just, you and I could go on forever about this, and most of your listeners, I'm sure, understand it. But yeah, it's a game of failure if you're looking just at the result, but you have to be comfortable with that.
So you told me before we got going that you actually help with a podcast that the association presents. Would you let my listeners know about both of the podcasts and what they may go and check out and what they might learn from each one?
Yes, thank you very much. So we have two podcasts at the National Deer Association. We have one that's hosted by our communications director, Brian Grossman. It's called Deer Season 365. And on Brian's show, he's going to get more into the weeds on some of the deer science and, those types of things, more the deer nerdy type stuff. He does occasionally just have a straight hunting show on there, which is cool. It's fun to do those. And then the show that I co-host with my good friend, Mike Groman, is called Coffee and Deer. And so our show is much more similar to Mia's show here in that we do a lot of variety. We'll do everything from talking about sharing venison to hunting stories. We like to do the story kind of behind the story, which is what you cover a lot, Mia. And there's so many great little morsels out there. And so, Coffee and Deer podcast, we come out every other Wednesday, and then Deer Season 365 comes out on the alternative Wednesdays. So yeah, we'd love for you to step over and give that a listen.
For sure. Hopefully, I'm going to go check them both out, and hopefully everyone else will check them out as well. We can always learn something new. Since you are the National Deer Association, is there anything that we can do to support the association and everything that you guys offer?
Yeah, there are lots of ways to do that. I would encourage people, if you're new to hearing about us, just go to deerassociation.com. Hop onto our About section. We do a nice job of explaining the history of our organization. We're getting close to 40 years old now, and what we do for deer habitat and hunting. It seems like maybe a broad mission, but it's really not. We're really focused. We've got a great team. It's not a huge team, but we pull a lot of weight for the size that we are. And so I would check that out. If you've heard about Field to Fork for the first time and you want to be a part of that, certainly let us know. We have local branches across the country where you could join up with other folks that are like-minded like you and continue to advance our work locally. So there's opportunities for that. Policy work. We don't always know all of the policy that's going on that impacts our sport. And so having local people on the ground that want to participate with that is very helpful to us. So yeah, the sky's kind of the limit. You can get in as deeply as you want, or you could just send us a $35 membership and join that way. Either way, we'd be happy to have you.
Yeah, and sometimes you have to be careful of what you stick your toes in, because sometimes it sucks you right in. I never thought I would be involved in any policy stuff. I hated politics, actually. And I giggle because my daughter hates politics right now. And
yeah,
I've become so involved that I'm just like, oh my gosh, like never did me, even 10 years ago, think that I would be involved the way I am now. But it's something that if you choose to become involved with, it's so important. And you can pick and choose your lane too. Like it doesn't have to be something for hunting. It could be something else that you're passionate about. But I am really excited to learn everything that you guys offer and where you're going. I actually didn't know about the programs until we had met, and I was like, oh, well, that's where he works now. Let me go research this. And QDMA, I knew, and then I was like, what happened to that? And so just the evolution and learning more about it is just awesome. I'm so thankful that you were on the show today.
No, well, thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity. It was great to run into you. And we shared a dinner table there. That was cool. And let's make it a point to definitely say hello at SHOT Show here in a few weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you. Did you want to do any shout outs for your personal social media?
Oh, sure. I guess I have. Let's see. It's funny
You
because
don't have to, but
no,
if you
I
want
always
to.
ask our guests that question. I never thought about it for myself. Yeah, it's easy to find me on Instagram's probably the best place where I try to. It's mostly all NDA related stuff, so it's just NDA Nick P. So no one wants to spell my last name. So NDA Nick P on Instagram, you can find me there. I'm on Twitter with the same handle as well, but I don't do as much over there. But yeah, I'd be happy to have folks check it out.
Hey, this is Lloyd Bailey, the Armed Lutheran, host of the Armed Lutheran Radio Podcast, reminding you that the podcast you're listening to is a proud member of the Self-Defense Radio Network. Check out all the great content at selfdefenseradio.net.